maybe a future SAYEF delegate to attend with, because here at Y4E, we always want that people would find like-minded peers who would help us through our career, our study, or just anything. Um, can anyone see the chat? Great. All right. So let's type in. Personally, I'm from Vietnam, but right now I'm based in Australia doing my master in environment. Now let's see who else are here with us. All right, we have Amira from Indonesia. Oh, okay. Hello, Gali. I think quite a few of you are coming from Indonesia.
Hi there, I'm Fernanda from Timor-Leste. I'm currently in Australia and I'm also doing my Master of Environmental Management at UQ Brisbane, with Queensland, yes.
All right, hello. I heard that UQ is a great place. I think it's the best place to do master environment, actually.
Yes.
Um, and we have, wow, we have so many people from Indonesia. We have someone, Paul from Philippines. We have Marjorie also from the Philippines. I think that you guys will find a lot of friends here. So keep it up. And then maybe later we would have a report or some kind of infographic to show everyone who's here today. And I really hope that you find some friends in this session. It's great to see participants joining us from all over our, Southeast Asia. And we hope that today's session will not only give you insights, but also have you make a few connections. Now let's begin, shall we? Let's go through the agenda of today's event first. So over the next 90 minutes, we hear from distinguished experts working across research, policy, and youth engagement. Before we begin, please let me briefly introduce our organization, the one behind this forum. So Youth for Energy Southeast Asia, or sorry, yeah, we'll get back to the housekeeping rules later. Can we go to the next slide, please? There's a quick slide on Y4E. Yes, that's the one. Youth for Energy Southeast Asia is a regional youth network that empowers young people across Southeast Asia to actively contribute to energy transition. We do this by increasing youth representation in regional and international discussions, supporting career development in the energy sector, and most of all, connecting young people with partners and opportunities to collaborate across borders. Our flagship initiative, one of the flagship initiatives, is the Southeast Asia Youth Energy Forum, or SAYEF in short. This year's theme is Youth for Energy Security and Catalyst for Accessibility in Southeast Asia, highlighting the important role young people can play in advancing an energy transition that is not only secure. SAYEF this year will take place in Manila, Philippines, from the 2nd to the 3rd of October, bringing together youth leaders, students, researchers, policymakers, industry professionals, and community representatives from all across the region to learn, to collaborate, and drive meaningful action together. More details will be presented at the later part of today. But first, let's go through some housekeeping reminders. Can you go to the previous slide, please? Yes, thank you. Now, first, please keep your camera on if possible throughout the session to foster a more interactive and engaging learning environment. There's also a virtual background that you can download using the link on the screen. And please keep your microphone muted unless you are invited to speak or ask a question, because we don't want to, speak in someone's mouth or like just overlap. So we would prefer if you keep everything in the chat, and then later on we may invite you to speak. Now, and the most important thing is just to be active and engaged. Feel free to ask any question during the Q&A, and we have someone from our team respond to you now or later in the session. And please stay until the end of the session to make the most out of this experience. And now I would like to invite you to turn on your camera for a minute to check whether it really works, and also so that we can capture this moment together. So I would like to invite our technical team to give everyone a quick instruction, maybe to turn on your camera, to smile a bit, and then count down until you get a perfect photo.
Okay, everyone, hold on. Okay, please open your camera. Okay, hold on. There's like someone from the room as well, coming in as well. Okay. I'm seeing everyone popping up their camera for a bit. Okay, get ready. Okay. Everyone keep smiling. All right. 1, 2, hold on. 1, 2, 3, keep smiling. I'm going to change to the next page. Smiling. All right. One last one. All right. Okay, that's all.
Okay, thank you so much, Arif, and thank you, everyone. I see a lot of lovely smiles. And now let's officially begin our session. I'd like to invite Amira Bikis, our co-founder of Y4EC, also the managing director, to deliver the opening remarks. Please welcome Amira.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Checking Lynn is okay. Yeah, good morning. Yes, good morning, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank you for spending your precious Saturday. I know that you are basically like, not only maybe have been working for the last 5 days, the weekdays, but also like maybe studying, doing your homework. But yeah, appreciate you all here. But besides you, I would like to also thank everyone that is speaking today, working behind the scenes as well. So if you see that there are so many Y4EC on the list of participants as well, they are the one that working behind the scenes to make this happen. And they are just like us. They are volunteers. They are powered with passion, have been so much like engaged with the late night coordination or even like too much of a WhatsApp messages. So give it up to all of our amazing volunteers. So before I begin, at Y4EC, probably you were wondering why we are doing this. It's basically because we believe that young people should not only be invited to listen to the energy conversations, but they need to be equipped to understand, question, and contribute to the issues that has been going on with the energy transition. And that is why I think SAYEF 2026 is aimed to bridge that. I think my colleague Bea or Bernadette is going to introduce a little bit more about it. But if you are just starting your academic career or professional journey in energy, climate, electricity, or even like about decarbonization measures, or even you are still like, figure out what all this about, you are actually in the right room, because we are going to walk us through basically what is actually the energy trends, what is you as a young people contributions to the energy transition as well. Last year, we already organized SAYEF in Malaysia. So this year, planning in Manila is actually our second instances. And previously, we already brought around 22 delegates, along with the hundreds of locals that are witnessing the development of policy and innovation ideas at the time. And what is important is because after this event, we basically facilitate the discussion or presentation of the findings or the output of our forum to the ASEAN Energy Business Forum. where basically the government, the business, and academic leaders gathered. And those experiences showed us something important, that one of the most effective ways for young people to advocate their intergenerational collaborations cause, just an inclusive transition, is basically to bring informed, prepared, and constructive ideas. And that is why this year we introduced 2 new things to SAYEF. And what makes me very excited is because the first one is actually about the first ever our own stakeholder-based energy modeling and policy simulation. So if you know about MUN, if you know about the ASEAN models, this is something that is more to the next level. So basically, this is a serious upgrade that we invent. It's called Helix Energy Council. Later on, my colleague Henry is going to introduce this one. And not only that, we are going to have our first ever collaboration with the International Renewable Energy Agency, or IRENA, on organizing the first ever Southeast Asia New Gen Energy Hackathon. Because we understood basically that not only that our young people involved in the policy space, but they are also need to be the executor, the implementer, the innovator, those that are walking the talk of the energy transitions that we want to gather in. So you don't have to worry I don't know a thing about this one, but I'm interested. And here you are. Today's event is basically about preparing you. We are all about giving you the information, the access, because we believe in access of information is basically should be an equal opportunities, everyone in the same footing about this. So we are very grateful for our friend experts, Dr. Dinita and Tyson's from the leading energy think tanks in the region, and also our in-house experts, Tata, my other co-founder, and RD, our big brain in the research of WIFR EC. They are going to help you with their knowledge, their expertise to help you develop your application, the inspirations of your application as well. Unfortunately, it's our participants is basically like very limited. So I hope that you are don't feel left out. Just try to be yourself, and then try to learn more and try to write that application so that we can see you in Manila. I'm just gonna stop here, and I'm looking forward to have a chat more with you in the chat box or something. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Amira. I hope that the kind words from Amira have helped you to have a better glimpse of what we're trying to do through SAYEF. And it is very, very exciting this year because, as Amira said, it's going to be bigger, it's going to be much more exciting since we have new sessions and we have so much thoughts and dedication spent into preparing these events. And we really hope to see you at SAYEF. Now, let's turn to our first session, which will set the stage for today's discussion. When we think about energy security, it is easy to focus on power plants, the grids, or fuel supplies, right? But energy security is ultimately about people, ensuring that everyone has access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy while navigating an increasingly uncertain world. To help us unpack these issues, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Dinita Sayawati. Dr. Dinita is a senior energy analyst at Amber, an independent global energy think tank dedicated to accelerating the transition to clean electricity. Her work focuses on electricity systems, renewable energy deployments, and coal transition across Southeast Asia. And through her research and policy engagement, she works closely with governments, development partners, and civil societies to understand how countries can build cleaner, more resilient, and more affordable energy system. And in today's session, she'll be sharing with us on securing Southeast Asia's energy future, why inclusivity, accessibility, and energy security matter. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dinita Sayawati.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lynn, for your kind introductions. Very excited to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm always happy to share my knowledge to energy enthusiasts out there. So this is actually a presentation that was prepared to brief the government representative in the conference that I attended a few weeks ago, but I think it's still relevant if we talk about it here. So this is just like a background on how ASEAN energy transition could be optimized, and what are the opportunities here. Next slide. Okay, so this is like some mandatory Ember slides. Those of you who don't know Ember yet, we are an independent think tank that aims to accelerate clean energy transitions, and you can easily download our data at www.ember-energy.org, and you can play around with the data, look at different countries, look at regions, and download emissions or power sector or capacities. Actually, it's quite complete, and we also have other data on like solar panel import from China. Next slide. Yeah, so these are some of our database that you could like play around with and then download the data for free. And those of you who are working on modeling, you can also embed the Ember's data directly in your model through API. Next slide. Okay, so let's get into the meat of the conversation today. Actually, we see a lot of strong growth in renewables in ASEAN today. Next slide. And we see that a lot of renewable energy capacity is being expanded and being planned in the region. And this is led by Vietnam, and based on the power, the National Energy Development Plan of a scenario and the ASEAN Center for Energy, ASEAN Energy Outlook 8 that was published last year. In 2025, we see that the region would need about 300 gigawatt of solar and 228 gigawatt of wind. So this is like more than tenfold than what the region has today. So in other words, in the next 20 years or so, you will see a lot of wind power being installed in your neighborhood and solar power, hopefully. Next slide. But as we all know, actually, in the region, the current power sector mix is largely dominated by fossil fuels. And we see in this, it's quite a small graphic that ASEAN has more than 50% fossil fuels in the electricity system. And in East Asia, similarly in South Korea, in Singapore as well, Singapore uses about like 90+% of its power generation mix from gas. China still uses a lot of coal, Thailand uses a lot of gas, and Japan, they use coal and gas. And the past crisis represented how vulnerable the ASEAN energy system are, because Middle Eastern gas actually represented 11 to 30% of total gas imports. And due to the crisis, a lot of gas prices in the spot electricity market has risen up. And even though a lot of countries, they pull out subsidies, they have gas and oil reserves. However, this just highlighted the case that it's not very sustainable to have our energy system reliant on imported fossil fuels. Next slide. Right, so as a buffer to the future energy crisis, as a technological change and acceleration, at Ember, we wanted to move forward from energy transition. We want to move into this electrification imperative, or the electrotech revolution. Next slide. Okay, so what does electrification even mean? It means that you've seen everywhere in the roads in Southeast Asia and in Australia as well. Electric vehicles is starting to dominate the street. Motorbikes from electricity-based motorbikes are actually quite cheaper to use right nowadays because the gasoline price has gone up, and a lot of news has been reported that Southeast Asia is actually lagging behind in energy transition. However, if we see in the electrification race, electrification is actually, we are quite winning in this electrification race because, in Europe, US, and China, these countries have gone and installed a lot of renewables. In our region, we haven't installed as much as renewables. However, in electrification, we are winning the race. Next slide. So basically, we base that notion because there's a lot of EVs being sold in Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia. And some of these countries are actually leading in front of the UK and EU. And in Latin America, surprisingly, Uruguay is leading the EV sales vehicles too. Next slide. So now we're going to look into a few more detail into country snapshots. Next slide. Okay, so there are reasons why countries turn into electrification in the transportation and also probably in the industrial sector, because all of these Southeast Asian countries that are using coal and gas are looking for alternative fuel prices that are cheaper. And in the past Ember's report, we've done a lot of reports on different countries, for example, from Singapore, from Thailand, and from Indonesia. And I'm just going to show you one of the example from Thailand case. So Thailand actually used a lot of gas. And back in 2022, when the Ukraine-Russia gas crisis happened, the inflation rate in Thailand rose significantly in 2023. So after that, Thailand government proposed a revised draft of PDP, Power Development Plan, which means that this is still a revised draft and they haven't yet announced their new PDP yet. However, this revised draft shows that a lot of solar and batteries will dominate the Thailand's power system, and a lot of them will be installed in the cost optimal pathways. And Amber actually calculated based on the draft of revised PDP in 2024 that solar and storage will displace costly gas, and there will be some economic benefits if Thailand decided to install more solar and storage rather than going into the gas route. Slide. And from Thailand, we can go to Vietnam now. So Vietnam's story is actually quite interesting because Vietnam solar boost happened after their introduction of feed-in tariff back in 2018 to 2020. And there were some difficulties in Vietnam because a lot of the solar generated electricity were being curtailed because the grids were unable to absorb all of solar that was being generated. So Vietnam put on hold to the development of solar, and they wanted to build and modernize the grid. But in order to do that, they need more funding to modernize the grid, but also to deploy solar and also to deploy wind, right? So this is why Vietnam introduced Direct Power Purchase Agreement, or DPPA. So DPPA is actually such agreement where the companies can directly purchase renewable electricity that is generated by power producer, whether it's in nearby locations or is in very far away locations. And this is actually quite like a step forward for Vietnam, because Vietnam is a centralized single buyer system, a bit similar to Indonesia. However, Vietnam is has a plan to liberalize its power market. And Amber calculated that if all of these companies these manufacturing companies joining the DPPA, then the share of renewable energy in Vietnam, it could double, whether it's in 2030, whether it's 2035. So I think this liberalization of the power market is very important to pull up the funding, but also to improve renewable energy deployment and accelerations of that. And not only Vietnam, I think Malaysia has also introduced CRAS or third-party agreement, which is similar to DPPA. And Thailand has also introduced a pilot project of DPPA for certain projects, including data centers. While in Indonesia government is actually still considered power wheeling as unconstitutional. So we are still under negotiations on whether power wheeling is feasible or not in the country. Next slide. And Singapore, this is taken from our past report. I think Singapore is also unique because it's one of the most advantaged economic country in ASEAN. At the same time, Singapore is quite small. It doesn't have a lot of renewable energy potential. Its solar technical potential is only 6 gigawatt, and the yearly demand is about 8 gigawatt. However, demand might increase significantly, especially after its expansion of its economic zones. And we calculated that Singapore could reach net zero power sooner by 2045 if they double their renewable energy imports. So currently Singapore only imports clean electricity from Laos under the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore power LTMS PIP, Power Integration Plan. However, Singapore is looking to import more clean electricity from its neighboring countries, including Indonesia, and I think it's also Cambodia and Vietnam. Next slide. And we talk about just transition, and actually in this webinar brief that I received, that I should be talking about just transition and how just energy transition could further building new jobs, new opportunities, not only for youth, but also for all the labor forces in the region. And this is actually shown in our past report on Indonesia. We calculated that close to 100,000 jobs could be created in Indonesia's coal-producing regions. So if this region transition away from coal into renewables, then it can bring a lot of new jobs, and it will also bring other economic benefits, because if you're shutting down coal power plant, it means you're also transitioning out from coal mining, which means that the environment will be able to be restored, and we will be able to transition away from coal, and then our grids will be cleaner, and we can, countries will eventually coal production in Indonesia will decline because of the declining demand from the global market, as well as everyone transitioning away from fossil fuels and into renewables. Next slide. This is a story about Philippines. So Philippines, I think, is one of the most important investment hotspots in clean energy in the region. In asset finance, Philippines has led in front of Vietnam and Indonesia. And if you see Bloomberg NEF, I think Philippines is ranked as the top 3 market in terms of easiness in doing business, in clean energy investment. I think behind these ranking is because the Philippine government is very open to investors, and Philippines also has recently introduced 100% foreign ownership for renewable energy facilities. They've also have these green certification scheme that could bypass bureaucracy for investment that wanted to build renewable energy facilities. And countries like Philippines, who doesn't own a lot of coal like Indonesia, they would need to transition away from fossils because they also don't want to get into the gas lock-in, right? So that's why Philippines is very ambitious in trying to attract more investment for their to make a robust renewable energy market. Next slide. Okay, so unlocking investment opportunities. We heard a lot that ASEAN needs billions of dollars for clean energy transition. ASEAN Center for Energy has put a value on that particular number, but like what makes financing is so difficult in the country. Next slide. So I think so this is like how much in a regional renewable energy market that could be unleashed in ASEAN if the ASEAN grid connection is connected. So about 30 gigawatt of solar and wind, and I think Amber is just being modest here. I think other organizations kind of calculated double of this value, renewable energy facilities that could be unlocked. However, there's complexities because ASEAN, we talk about ASEAN as a region, but if we are investment, we will look at it not from a regional perspective, but from a national perspective. You wanted to invest in ASEAN, you have to choose which country you want to invest in. And each market has its different governance, different power market system, and different stakeholders, different social dynamics. So it's a lot of headache actually. So investor would mainly look into Philippines, would mainly look into Vietnam and Malaysia, from like based on some conversation that I had with these industry representative. Next slide. Yeah, so investment in renewables, grid, and battery storage, it needs to scale up a lot to meet the announced energy and climate pledges in ASEAN. I think that as like coming from this region, we know that government likes to pledge a lot, but I think our role in this sense is to make sure that their pledges can turn into actions, and we can, our purpose is to make like guidelines and policy brief or narrative that could support their pledges. So, hey, show them how to do this. And yeah, so I think that's our important role here. Next slide. And again, a lot of money that needs to be invested in ASEAN to avoid costly power disruption, because smart ASEAN grids needs to be made smarter, needs to be modernized, and needs to be connected as well. So yeah, next slide. Yeah, so like I said before, the financials are already ready, but is ASEAN ready? Next slide. This is just like some data that shows that China has been a major financier. Indonesia, Vietnam, and Laos as the key recipients of its energy-related grants and loans. Japan has also become a major financier here in the region. Next slide. And from these financing by development partners, these are some of the structure in-depth instruments like loans or others or grants. We've seen a lot of loans here, which means that our region might be in debt for other countries for like the coming years. Next slide. So this is just like some examples on how ASEAN investment is different from China and Japan in contrast with the US, because China has mostly been focusing on renewables and fossil, and by fossil we are looking into the captive coal sector and nickel processing sector in Indonesia. US has kind of phased out or being very invisible in the region in terms of investment. Next slide. Yeah, so how can we invest? How can we close the investment gap? We need policy certainty, because investors don't like to, grab. I don't know what you call it in English. Grab a cat from like a closed bucket. So they want to know what they're dealing with. We need to mobilize green and blended finance more. And we need to expand public-private partnership. We need to upgrade grids, interconnection. We need to build local capacity. Starting from this initiative here, we need to make awareness to everyone. We need to educate people about the importance of energy transition. It doesn't matter if you don't know the technicalities yet, but what it matters is like you know that it is important, and you communicate to people, your closest friend, to your teacher, to your parents, to your family, that this issue is important. And thus, I think then we can make a difference here. Yeah, thank you. I think that's all my presentation today. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Dinita, for the brief but very comprehensive and very transparent presentation. I believe that everyone here from any country has learned something new today. And honestly, I low-key wish that you were one of my lecturers because you speak in a very clear but very comprehensive way. Personally, one of the key takeaways from your presentation is that energy security isn't simply about producing more energy, right? But is also ensuring that the transition benefits everyone in every country. And of course, recognizing this challenge is only the first step. The next question becomes, how do we actually build an energy system that is secure, resilient, and future ready? And this requires not only new technologies, but also sound policies, effective governance, and collaboration across sectors. And our next speaker brings exactly that perspective. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Chi Dao. So Dr. Dao is the director of the Center for Environmental Economics and Climate Change Studies, where he oversees research and on sustainable marine science and the environment, climate, energy nexus. His work explores the intersection of engineering principles and socio-economic considerations for decarbonization pathways in emerging economies. In 2022, he co-founded the Vietnam Youth for Climate Policy Working Group and served as the lead author of 2 UNDP reports. And he's now a PhD candidate and researcher at the University of California, San Diego. Today, with us, Dr. Dao will explore how energy innovation and technology can work together to strengthen energy security across Southeast Asia. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chi Dao.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. And yes, I thought Dinita gave an excellent presentation on the ASEAN energy transition landscape overview. And so I thought today we could talk a little bit about an alternative angles to things, because often in these complex matters like the energy transition, the devil is in the details. So I thought we could talk about certain considerations in the perspective of what matters and what turns certain things like technical potential into more realistic consideration of deployability, reliability, and what makes things inclusive. So I thought we would go into, am I clicking my slide, or are someone helping me? We go to the next slide. Perfect. Okay. So I thought we could talk about first a certain number of considerations when we talk about the resource assessment for renewable energy in ASEAN, and then we can get a little bit into some of the emerging technologies such as floating photovoltaics and offshore wind, which are also very interesting and very kind of hotly discussed topics in the space, and then tie it in with how some of these considerations will play a role in longer term power system modeling, where we understand the planning implications of the consideration of these resources, which is the basis of producing things like power development plan that Dinita mentioned across the different countries. Different countries have all kinds of different planning, but at the core of it, a lot of the consideration is very similar in terms of reliability, in terms of meeting demands sufficiently, and having a long-term view, balancing things like reliability, energy security, and obviously a least cost development pathways. Next slide, please. So We won't have time today to get into all the steps and all, all the scenarios, buildings, but the goal is to get a glimpse of what comes of different considerations when we look closer at some of the claims and some of the general understanding. So, for example, I think at this point we all know that South Asia has some very tremendous potential for renewable energy. The distribution across different technologies is a little different across different countries. For example, offshore wind is the potential is highest with Vietnam and Philippines, where some other technology is different depending, but not only on the natural resources, but also on the regulatory and policy landscape of individual countries. And then to make matters more complex, there's a physical potential, and then there's an economic potential, and then after that, there are also other considerations such as conservation. So there are international frameworks that governs this conservation practices, but the complexity is some of these practices are actually introduced and adopted after some countries already deployed a significant amount of renewables. So now we talk about if we want to integrate some of these conservation targets into national planning, then we have to look at the distribution of the potential for renewable energy quality across the intersection between different conservation practices and areas. And so that motivated the study that we did at CECCS. Next slide, please. And so this result shows why that distinction matters, because after the full screening, about 55%, after exclude all the generally unusable areas because of things like slope and land use, land cover, then only roughly half of the area remains, but then only 47% of the solar weighted energy opportunity remains, whereas it's about 51% for wind, that's already a steep decline. And you can continue to see that trend continues as you exclude the different layers, and WDPA and forest and KBAs are just different considerations in terms of conservation. And so the takeaway is that a final land area number by itself can make the opportunity look larger than it really is, especially for solar, which also in South Asia is a very important consideration, because South Asia is also economies are very agriculture based. So a lot of times there can be land use conflicts in terms of assigning whether you want to do, reserve the land for agricultural practices, or you want to use it to develop renewable energy. Now you can develop things like agrivoltaics, which is getting more and more popular these days, but there are fundamental challenges to that as well. One of which would be economic. Another one would be the technical expertise required to deploy that, and then how that competes in the market is a different consideration. Next slide, please. And next one. And so looking at this, there's also a distribution across different countries. So the same screening stack can give a land use planner and an energy planner different answers. And as we've seen before, for solar and for wind, different data layers lead to different weighted losses in terms of what is feasible, but there are very important considerations. And one thing that we found important would be key biodiversity areas, which is KBA, and also the overlap with the forest consideration in terms of, well, do we want to keep the forest, or do we want to deploy renewable energy? And then if we want to deploy some renewable energy in certain forests, then how much of it and what kind of considerations or what areas would be optimal? And this is important if you look at the region as a whole, because you can look at broader goals, regional goals, like if you want to, let's say, keep the 30% land by 2030, right? Then you can certainly combine certain high potential areas or high resource quality areas and then reserve more in certain other locations. Whereas if you consider it by individual countries, then you are more constrained in that sense. So it's important to look at also the distribution across areas. And what it shows us is Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, and Vietnam are more forest constrained in this analysis, whereas Cambodia, Philippines, Thailand, and Laos are more constrained by KBAs. And so what this shows us, the takeaway is that considering only one uniform ASEAN approach would be too crude, and countries would have different screening and planning priorities, and forest categories themselves may need to distinguish intact forests from plantations, or if you get into it, there are all kinds of subcategories like degraded tree covers and other subcategories. Next slide, please. And so just before we move on from this is from a paper we did at CCCS, and this is a map of the 4 quadrants between high and low resource quality and high and low risk for biodiversity and conservation practices. And so what you want to pay more attention to is where there's high resource and high risk, because typically where you want to build things is where you have high resource. But if it coincides with the high risk, then perhaps you would want to avoid it and go to the high resource, lower risk areas. And so these considerations become more important as we look at the region as a whole, because even between solar and wind, you can kind of tell there are some certain differences. Let's say between the Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia cluster over there, and there are certain priorities that one can make. And if we apply a planning model, like the one that was previously mentioned, the certain works about the APG by various different organizations, and you integrate the land use conservation considerations into it, then it would give us some very interesting result, which is also another work being developed at CCCS, where we look at these alternative considerations and look at the role of regional coordination to meet them. But the bottom line here is the message is do not build at all in these land conservations, because at some point it's always an economic question that you have to consider for holistic development. And you have larger equilibrium or net zero or CGE models to determine this thing. But what we're trying to highlight here is that there has to be a hierarchy of searching in the right order, and also have to consider various other things like early grid or market development across these different countries, so that we can also utilize and deploy in the lower conflict frontiers of renewable energy. And that would be the takeaway. And it's a reminder for us that while we do studies and reports and analysis that tend to model this thing, and we kind of have to simplify some of the elements, it reminds us that once we incorporate them all, then it gets a lot more complicated. And then obviously there are certain things that are not so homogeneous across different countries. So a lot of things to consider over here, and I hope that gives us a view of certain perspectives on what else we should be thinking about. And then now I want us to turn to some emerging technologies, certain things that are more specific, that are emerging in the landscape. Next slide, please. And we want to look at a technology which is floating photovoltaic, which is where you deploy solar on water bodies. And one particular form of floating PV or FPV is hydro FPV, where you actually deploy the reservoirs of hydropower. Next slide. And the idea is very simple, because there's conflicting land use purposes, as we have highlighted in the presentation before. A practice would be that you can deploy floating solar on water body surfaces. And what that helps is that, well, first of all, it saves land. And then second of all, it can also make use of the existing electrical infrastructure, and therefore have certain benefits. Next slide, please. As you can see in this diagram over here, you can have an FPV system, and that FPV system can connect to the hybrid substation. And there are benefits in doing that, even though the cost to deploy may be higher. There may also be savings in terms of in terms of the installation cost and interconnection cost. And then you can look at it through different dimensions like physical, electrical, and operational. And there's also the question of if you do that, then how would the dispatch work between the solar and the hydropower? Next slide. And so just to recap a little bit about these technologies, since some of you may not be so familiar, there would be the hybridization impacts, and a lot of them are benefits, as we've just mentioned, but also I wanted to highlight that it's exactly because there's a lot of documented benefits and impacts, but there hasn't been any empirical study actually looking at the real deployment at scale of this type of particular FPV technology that is not as well understood under what kind of circumstances that these benefits would apply, even for things that are like evaporation saving, meaning that in certain countries, if you put FPV on water bodies, it helps the water from being evaporated because you kind of put a layer in between. Also, there's cooling benefits, like water cools the equipments, and as you may know, some solar panels, if the temperature gets very high, then the efficiency decreases. So putting it on the water and with certain type of setup, it's beneficial in terms of maintaining efficiencies. So there's all these kind of considerations, but the point is it's very different across different geographies and different deployment projects. And it's not as much understood empirically from an empirical standpoint on what kind of benefits would motivate what kind of arrangement, which is what motivated our study, where we looked at we collected global census data sets of about between 200 to 300 projects. And then we looked at the various dimensions, including how the project is set up. Is it sharing an interconnection? What is the size? What is the relative capacity ratio between the FPV and the hydropower deployment? Is it supposedly a project that is hybridized on the lake or on the reservoir, or is it a project on the land where we call it LPV, is just land photovoltaics? And then we look at the various geographical considerations, like population density of the area or how close it is to the grid. And then we ran a regression model empirically trying to understand what would be the drivers of how these design features are considered and therefore resulted. Next slide, please. And next. And so just to give an overview, this is the description of the data that we collected. And as you can see, this is very relevant for Southeast Asia, because if we look at this different cross-section Southeast Asia, in our data sets, actually the dominant amount of contracted and planned projects for hydro FPV, even more so than various other continents. And the interesting trend, right, is that even though it's leading that, most of it is currently planned, and it kind of signals to us the considerations that we were discussing earlier about how there may be land conflicts in South Asia, where practically there's certain areas where you want to deploy because maybe think about the high resource quadrant, but also now you can have a secondary metric, which is maybe high conflict quadrants. So it's not even just conservation, but there may also be other competing interests. And so it would be natural for a place where you're being more land constraints, and especially if you are looking further into longer landscape, longer timelines like 2050, 2060 net zero, then more and more these conflicts will emerge. And so it's interesting to see this trend, and South Asia leads a committed pipeline about 11.5 gigawatts, and much of that is not operating. So we've made a distinction between what is deployed projects and what is actually planned, as you will see in the next slide. So this is the mapping of the data points, and you can see that it's not obvious that places with high hydropower and therefore reservoir volume and therefore the potential will be the places where you actually deploy a lot of hydro FPV. So for example, North America has enormous reservoir-based floating solar potential, but yet very little committed capacity. Part of the reason would be that if there's not that much more land competing interest, then you can just put it in an LPV, which is put it on the land and not on the lake, so that you save a little bit of the capex. And there's still configurations where you can benefit from the hybridization, where you connect to the same substation or share electrical components, for example, where several ASEAN countries have lower technical potential, but actually much larger project pipelines. And if you take a look at the green dots to the blue circle, it's kind of, some of them are connected by a straight line, which is the advancement between what is the pilot project and what is planned in the future. And as you can see, there's almost like a linear trend that you can establish, which shows the potential at each of this reservoir being pushed further and further towards what is the physical potential, what can be deployed so as to make full use of that space. So this gives us kind of an understanding as to what the initial physical constraint to this expansion problem would be. Next slide, please. And then just to make sure that our efforts are useful, we also did a scan of some pretty major global data sets on hydropower and solar. And what we did was that we picked every single hydropower projects and then did a radius scan between 1 to 25 kilometers, and then we try to establish hits on solar projects in very well-established solar databases to ensure that it's not really just a simple matching exercise and establishing what solar projects and therefore FPV project on this hydropower. And we just found that just by going all the way up to 25 kilometers square, 25 kilometer radius, which is already quite a significant distance, we don't get that many hits at all. So therefore, there's a need for ensuring that we empirically collect this data set, and at the same time having all the documented evidence about all the different dimensions. And upon having that, then we can learn a few things about what drives these design decisions or how these projects manifest. Next slide, please. And so I'm just briefly going through some of the factors here, and probably just skim through some of them because we had somewhere between 20 to 30 features that we looked at for each of the data points, and looked at what the main drivers are. But basically, we learned that policy is actually the most important feature when selecting the PV technology between LPV and FPV, meaning that geography alone doesn't perform as very well as the national floating solar policy by themselves. For example, China would be banning hydro FPVs building on large reservoirs, so floating solar structure is not allowed. So that's clearly a strong sentiment against it. And so that's classifying the policy. Now, if you look at other countries, and previously we had a slide on regulations, and we categorize different countries' policies against for or against FPVs, then we can see that the sentiment from the policy is the strongest feature. Next slide, please. And also, we understand that the land scarcity is encoded mainly through policy and land economics variables. So without getting into the details, what it just tells us is that much of the effect appears to measurable land economics variables, and through policy, meaning that if you model and feature these categories separately, they all have pretty good predictive power. But if you put them together, the predictive power is still high, but it doesn't significantly increase. So from a data analysis standpoint, it tells us that a lot of these features the meaning of the features is already built into this very similarly. Next slide, please. And then we also look cross-sectionally at the routing, where we show that a shared connection is common, as there are benefits that we already mentioned. But it's much more likely when the hydro and solar assets have a single owner, because that removes a lot of the barriers and the challenges you have when you have multiple owners. Then the projects often use more separate infrastructure. because these things are kind of difficult to figure out in real life. An outcome that looks purely technical can therefore be a governance and constructing outcome as a consideration. Next slide, please. And just briefly, this is a distribution of the capacity sizing for different projects across different dimensions, including technology, routing, and project maturity. And as you can see, it's pretty spread out. And so you can see that large ratios are predominantly floating, independently routed, so they're not constrained by worries about curtailment or co-dispatch. And also, the larger ratio between the FEV and the hydros are often not yet operational. And this is consistent with what we understood before, as this is an emerging technologies, and countries or project developers, when they start with it, they want to pilot a lower level and then ascend to a full one once the co-dispatch and once the operation is fully validated. Next slide. And so a final slide on this would be, we did also a number of case studies, and we looked closely at the different factors that we analyze, and then look exactly at how the specifics of each location can inform the relative importance of each impact or benefits onto the operation of the system. And we don't have that slide. I don't think we have that slide over here, but basically what we found was that it's very consistent with what we understand, even when you divide projects by quadrants of water scarcity, meaning that, you know, it's more arid climates, and therefore something like saving water evaporation may be more important. There's a paper in renewable energy that talks about this for South Africa. And then on the other hand, you also think about land scarcity through a proxy, which is population density. And this is where, if you don't have so much land, then the fact that you can put things on water bodies become more significant. So there are different considerations. And if you look at these places particularly, then it would make more sense. It would give us more clue as to why these things are deployed. And the central takeaway message here is, you know, the same FEV technologies can have different values particular to very different geographies and socioeconomic considerations. And so taking this from a purely technical or techno-economic approach may not be sufficient. And that's kind of the main message that our study brought over, besides establishing the global census of rather constrained observation of an emerging technology. Next slide. And so now we transition to something as...
Dr. Dao, I really do hate to interrupt, because this has been such an interesting discussion. But unfortunately, we're running a bit short on time, so I'll have to pause you there. I honestly wish we had another full session with you, because it feels like we've only scratched the surface and there's too much more to unpack.
Oh yeah, no worries at all. Practically each of these presentation, you know, at its full length is at least 30 to 45 minutes. So we try to cut it down a little bit, but you know, you never know with these things. But yeah, happy to follow up on other things after, or, you know, whenever convenient. I think that's just the essential takeaway message here for the participants would just be that all of these are important considerations, and a lot of the presentations that we have been hearing, and also, you know, in the news and the sentiment that Southeast Asia is moving towards, is that we need very specific considerations with respect to very specific technologies and dimension and access, like finances, and it would require a very high level of research and modeling and a lot of hypotheticals. And so, just as a final takeaway message, I think that opens us up to a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of requirements in terms of how rigorous this discussion and analysis is. So that would be the takeaway, and hopefully, you know, each of the participants here will hopefully now and in the future play a role in increasing renewable energy deployment and feasibility in Southeast Asia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for summing it up for us. And I do really agree with you that we need to keep in mind that the technologies are not as simple as we claim, right? Because there are so many other angles that we need to take into consideration. And before we move on, I'd like to take a brief moment to express our sincere thanks to both Dr. Dinita and Dr. Dao for sharing their knowledge and perspectives with us today. And we know that both of them have really demanding full-time roles and other schedules as well. So we are truly grateful that they choose to spend their time with us today and support the next generation of energy leaders. And for everyone joining us, this is just a glimpse of the experience at SAYEF. And throughout the forum, you have the opportunity to hear from and to interact with many more experts and practitioners from all sorts of fields. And ultimately, the future of Southeast Asia's transition depends on the next generation. And that brings us to our final session. Please welcome Jesiel Tata and RD to discuss why youth skills matter.
All right. Thanks, Lynn, for the brief introduction. And once again, just echoing what Lynn has said, thank you to Dr. Tao and Dr. Dinita for the really enjoyable presentation. This is a glimpse of the sort of knowledge that we hope to bring about at SAYEF for those of you here who have been following us or have not yet, but are curious to know what SAYEF is all about. So this is going to be a more light-hearted chat that I'm going to have with Tata, my boss here. I call her Chief Jitsai just because, I report to her at Y4E. We are going to be talking about building the skills for the future and why youth skills matter. And we're going to tie this in with why we're holding SAYEF, Southeast Asia Youth Energy Forum, and also all the other programs that we have at Y4EC. So Tata, I'm going to immediately jump in now to the fact that we've had an energy crisis. A lot of countries in Southeast Asia had to face restrictions on fuel consumption, some facing power outages because we're missing a lot of the oil and gas imports that we rely on from the Middle East. So amid this crisis, we have talked internally about trying to see where youth contributions can come in to build energy resilience and accessibility in Southeast Asia in the event that the shock prolongs or happens again in the future. What's our plan here, Tata?
Yeah, it's a great question. What is our plan? Well, can we go to the next slide, please? So what already mentioned is just the overwhelming feeling of what can I do? Today, everybody in this room might be looking at us, oh, well, we're a huge organization. We have like 60 plus people now. But we really started with just Amira, who gave the opening remarks, and myself, who were like, okay, what can we do? We don't know, we're alone. What can I do as a single person? And we've decided, okay, maybe, well, we wish we had a platform for people just like today that you guys are listening to. We wish that there was some free resources, some people who can help us understand what is going on and what can I do? Because you have to understand what is going on first, understand the context before you can really figure out like what is your role, what can you do in that picture? So we decided to found Y4E in about 2023. So you can see a bit on the slide there, we have some partners, what are we trying to do? Increase representation, building careers. Everybody here in this room, in this call also are looking to how do we can advance careers, how we can shift our paths, how we can play a role in the green transition. And as well as we're trying to collaborate and amplify the actions of us as individuals, us as organizations, and us as a region. Next slide, please. So we are guided, Y4E is guided by a energy compact. What we call internally is our North Star. What that means is there's so many opportunities to speak about something or to read about something. And sometimes we can shift as individuals what we want. But as an organization, we want to have a North Star or somewhere we're trying to work towards. So when we make decisions on, oh, should we run this project? Should we partner with this organization? Should we engage and do certain activities? We always think, okay, are we walking towards the path that is going to lead us to the North Star that we have? So it's almost like a 5-year plan. So our targets you can see on screen is by 2030, we have certain amount of numbers that we plan to work towards. And that really helps us inform what we're doing. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through the ASEAN today. Dr. Nita and Tyson made such a really great explanation of where we're at now in terms of energy, in terms of access, connectivity, and the developments in terms of like direct PPA or being able to like buy and sell power. But what we want to focus on for the slide on the right, you can see is that the youth when we say youth or young people, we mean between 15 to 34. Now, everybody in this call, you're probably in this age range, and that's okay, because from 15, you're still a high school student, right? And we're going all the way. Yes, Artie, you're still to youth. We're going all the way to 34. And that means like young adults, that means like first, second, third jobbers. We're getting into early like management roles. So you can see that's a really big actual population of young people. So we also trying to shift the narrative around what does young people mean, and we're not just children. So this is what we're saying. Next slide, please. So you can see that we really want to focus on securing Southeast Asia like energy future, powering the transition, and building the skill for the future. Now, so to Artie's questions, what can youth contribute to the energy and to energy resilience and accessibility? Now, as you've heard, Dr. Janita and Tyson really give a good overview, both like one a bit more focused on policy and what's the developments there, economic side, and one very much on the technical side. You will see, and we hope that you take away, if you take anything away from this call, that you see that energy transition is very difficult. And saying that we want renewables now it's so easy to say and it's so easy to call for, but it's very, very hard to do. And I hope that kind of like that kind of shows through. And there are myriad of challenges, both at the household level, at the city level, at the country, at the regional level, which has been like touched upon. So part of that is to build our resilience as a youth group, is to understand this context. And you might be thinking, oh, I don't understand yet. Do not worry, we all don't fully understand it, but we're all on a journey to learn more and to be able to understand the context. So we as individuals, as advocates, as youth leaders can better suggest or give feedback when somebody asks us for our feedback. Because in our region, it's very common for people to say, what do young people want? And then we get really shocked by like, oh, you don't think young people want renewable energy? You don't think young people want to use clean power? So these are kind of things that we're trying to combat. And in terms of accessibility, we look at accessibility in two different ways. One of the accessibilities that we look at can be more towards accessibility to the technologies themselves, because the prices of, say, a solar panels going down, it's more accessible in terms of how to install. We can find ways to do it on the internet. So there's different ways that we can now physically access these types of distributed energy resources through like solar panels, for example, or solar like water pumps for irrigation, and also accessible to information. Like this webinar, for example, you might have found it through Google, you might have found through a friend. There's so many more, I would say, like not just influencers, but people who are ready and willing to share knowledge to really drive that energy transition that we are very excited to work with. Of course, Dr. Janita and Tyson being two very great examples. I would definitely have to say that what they've shared, often those are lecture style information, and sometimes there's a paywall. You have to be a student at certain places or universities to be able to access this information. So it's very so we are very grateful that we're all able to host this accessible for everybody in this call. And we really believe that knowledge is fundamentally so important, because it really allows us as individuals to not just grow in our careers, but also grow as youth leaders, to really be able to see when the opportunities arise, that we can be perhaps, when we get a seat at the table and somebody asks us, okay, so what do you want? We're not shell-shocked of, oh, we've suddenly got the opportunity to raise our voice, and now we don't know what to say beyond, I want renewable power. So this is kind of like a little bit of like a highlight of what we're trying to do here at SAYEF. And SAYEF as a conference being an event where we want to be able to, whatever this is in this call that you've heard is like, this is like a taster, as Lynn has mentioned. And at SAYEF will be a full 2 days where we can really dive deeper into that and also equip young people with more practical, both knowledge, but also the skills to be able to participate actively in the energy transition. But I'll pass it back to Artie. I know this is a fireside chat. I don't want to drone on too much on what we're trying to accomplish.
All right, Tata, thank you so much. So we want to avoid the youth getting shell-shocked. We shell-shocked when we're already been given the microphone, right? We seize the stage from the grown-ups, but then we might not know what to say just yet. And I guess one thing that is particularly relevant on why we have Y4EC to begin with is because of our shared experience. Across Southeast Asia, we have a similar culture. And in this sense, the East Asian way of doing things, where the young people are sometimes not seen as equals to those grown-ups in the room until you have the credentials, until you make sure that you've set the bar of the knowledge, and then you broke through that sort of like ceiling. And to that end, I want to point out that stats you mentioned earlier again about youth making up a third of Southeast Asia. According to the ASEAN Secretariat, youth population in Southeast Asia is going to peak at 2038, numbering at 220 million people. For context, everyone, ASEAN right now, 680 million people. That means we are going to be the leaders of the future, right? And if we were to make energy decisions, we need to be well equipped. And so talk us through the sort of tools and practical knowledge that Y4EC is trying to build to equip us, the youth here, as future leaders on energy. And by the time we are able to seize the stage, we're already aware of what we want to say, what we want, and can express it in a convincing way that the grown-ups in the room will listen to us.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Touching on kind of the skills and experience there. As you will hear more on later on in this call, we have let's call it two tracks. We have the Helix Energy Council, and we also have the hackathon, which is the Arena New Gen Hackathon, which there will be more details on it, and which will be our two main events, apart from a curated series of lectures, fireside chats, and panels that we will host at the conference at SAYEF as well. There will also be these two events, which currently open for applications. If you're interested, please check out our website for that. But what we're trying to really do with both of them, I'm not going to go into too much detail on how they work, because that will come later in this call. But it was more like we're trying to build the foundations for young people to feel that confidence and to feel like they're not alone. And this is so important to me as a young person who, when I went to my first COP, the Conference of Parties on the FCCC COP, so Climate COP, and I was so shocked by there's so many other young people here, but I just don't know them. And then I felt, okay, how do I get into a network with these people? How do I meet these people? How do I try to contribute more? Because when I felt that there's other people who are also just as confused as I was at that moment, but I wanted to do something for the world, but it's such a big mission and I didn't know how to do it. And I felt alone. When I felt alone, I felt like I couldn't do it. But when I knew that, there's other people out there, maybe they don't have to be in Thailand, they don't have to be in ASEAN, but there's other people trying to do good. And I was like, okay, I want to feel inspired by them. So we made a network, we connected, and then I feel like, okay, once I have friends in the space, I can do more. And so that really is the foundation of like why I feel like, okay, we need a network. But once you build a network and the network is full of people who maybe are not as informed as we hope to be, then we think, okay, the next step is, okay, how do we find people to give us good advice, to give us knowledge, to help guide us? And this touches on mentorship. It means that I want you guys to think about all the people, all the amazing people who you look up to, even if they're not energy people. They could be like, if you look up to, I don't know, Elon Musk or somebody who is like a figure that you think, are very successful. They all started as young people who didn't know anything. This is the truth of everybody. All the presidents, all the people of this world, all the CEOs, like Antonio Guterres, I'm sure, they all, if you ask them, they would all tell you that once upon a time, they had somebody to give them good advice. And that's something that means so much, to have good mentorship, even officially or unofficially, to have somebody to be able to give you, like, sometimes it's just a nudge of confidence, or sometimes it's just like, these are your options. Maybe think about this long term, blah, blah, blah. So I think mentorship is really important. And that's something that Y4E currently, we have just closed our 2026 applications for mentorship, which we had over 500 applications across all 11 ASEAN countries. And we had 32 mentors. This is a growth from 24 mentors last year. And what I want to highlight to you guys, obviously that information is also on our Instagram. We've announced it. It's more that we had mentors who came to us and said, I wish I had this when I was younger, and therefore I want to be a mentor for this program. There were so many people who reached out to us and said, we want to volunteer to be a mentor, which is very difficult to think about. Like 2 years ago when we planned this program, and we had to really think about, like, what if we don't get enough people who want to be mentors? And so isn't that a wild thing to think that as young people, we think that there's not that many people who want to help others? And then in reality, there's a lot of people who are just waiting for the experience to share their journey and help another young person to find the path that is a bit more easier for them. So that's something that, if that's interesting to you guys, please be on the lookout. We will definitely do another one maybe early next year for the program. And that's also free for all young people. So these are kind of like examples that we really want to highlight. And I'm going to pass it back to Artie for our wrap up.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So a lot of mentorships, a lot of networking, and basically just collecting our voices, because that's what we can do right now. And only together then we can seize the stage and then reshape the direction of travel of how the energy transition moves toward. You dropped a lot of a plug there, Tata, on our programs, on our activities. And that's not going to be on us to explain further. Instead, we have our team who's going to come in now and elaborate on those projects and programs. Lynn, I'll pass it back over to you.
Right. Thank you, Artie. Thank you, Feta. I think one of the nicest things about events like this is realizing that you're not the only one interested in these topics, right? And looking at the chat today, it's been great to see so many people passionate about energy, climate, sustainability. And so if you found someone in the chat whose interest sounds a lot like yours, don't let this Zoom session be the end of that conversation. Please send them a hello or LinkedIn request and then start something from there. And so we've dropped a lot of teasers today, right? Now I'd like to officially introduce SAYEF 2026. I'd like to welcome my colleague Bea, the country director and the big boss of SAYEF, to the stage to tell us more about this exciting event.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. Next slide, please. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Bea. I'm from the Philippines, and I'm here to introduce to you one of our key flagship programs, which is the Southeast Asia Youth Energy Forum, or what we'd like to call a SAYEF for short. So let's try to first go into a little bit of history. How did SAYEF started in the first place? So SAYEF is a regional youth-led initiative that empowers young people like you across ASEAN to shape your ideas and participate towards developing the region's energy transition. It started first in 2023 following ASEAN-Indonesia chairship, and then just recently last year, we held SAYEF 2025 in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Next slide, please. So what does SAYEF have attained so far? So in terms of our impact, SAYEF really empowered more young people across the region. When you think about energy and young people, we cannot deny the fact that it's very much important that we have to include the widest range of stakeholders in order to achieve a just energy transition. And this includes ASEAN youth. So in terms of SAYEF, last year we have achieved about 120,000 young people who became interested, wherein 2,000 of those got to participate in SAYEF and Forum and as well as its sideline programs online. In terms of the young people that we have invited, we were able to support about 20 young people to come into Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, ultimately culminating with that with a Southeast Asia Youth Energy Declaration on energy and climate action. Next slide, please. So here are some of the photos of SAYEF 2025. As you can see, there's a lot of diversity in terms of the range of young people that participated in the program, some of which are students or some of which are also young professionals that are engaging or actively working across the energy transition. Key highlights of SAYEF showcase about panel discussions, networking, meeting young people, and collaborating towards a just energy inclusive transition. Next slide, please. So this year, we're bringing SAYEF 2026 to the Philippines. Why are we bringing SAYEF in the Philippines? So the Philippines is this year's ASEAN chair with the key motto, Navigating Our Future Together. This chairship highlights how we need to expand the sustainable energy future, which also includes, young people. And we want to bring SAYEF 2026 following the ASEAN chairmanship. So by aligning SAYEF's goals to the Philippines chairship deliverables, we can ensure that, young people are going to actively contribute in the region's energy future. And what the SAYEF 2026 would look like, next slide, please. This is what SAYEF 2026 will look like. As you can see, the key focus areas and activities will include a main event and as well as key policy outcomes. So there is a key site visit wherein delegates and participants will have the opportunity to visit a Philippine energy community, offering young people a first-hand exposure in terms of the Philippines energy landscape, and as well as the clean energy infrastructure, technology, and initiatives. Furthermore, we will have the forum itself wherein we will be inviting high-level speakers across government, business, civil society, and youth movement. This main forum will have a series of panel discussions that will invite young people to learn more from key experts in terms of a dialogue, and also create an awards and cultural night to celebrate cross-cultural understanding and as well as deepen collaboration among young people. So in order to attain its key outcomes, we will have two main tracks, which is the Helix Energy Council and New Gen Hackathon. Next slide, please. So before I transition back to Lynn, let's first try to delve into what are the two thematic tracks of SAYEF 2026. This year, we want to further expand towards the first declaration that we made in 2025. So we hope to have an innovation challenge to bring in young people's ideas to life and also invite young people in terms of a simulation on a enhanced model ASEAN energy meeting. So if you are coming in groups of 3 to 5 young people and are interested in terms of innovation, we'd invite you to apply towards the Arena New Gen Hackathon. While if you are more interested in terms of policy makings, identifying how to ASEAN has navigated in the energy landscape, we invite you to apply in the Helix Energy Council. So please visit our link, which is youthenergyc.com/SAYEF 2026, and application would be running until 27th July 2026. All right, so I'm going to be passing it back to Lynn for further discussions on the two thematic tracks.
All right. Thank you, Bea, so much. I hope everyone has had a clear idea of SAYEF and what exciting opportunities are available for you. And one of those opportunities is the Arena New Gen Hackathon. This program, as Bea said, will give young innovators the opportunity to work in interdisciplinary teams and tackle real-world energy challenges. And to tell us more about this initiative, it is my pleasure to invite Jason.
Thank you, Lynn, for that introduction. So next slide, please. So is everyone still energetic out there? I know it's already lunchtime for those who are coming from GMT+8, but we'll try to make it as exciting as possible. But so I'm going to introduce you about the Arena New Gen Hackathon. So, but first, I know everyone doesn't know what a hackathon is. Next slide, please. So just to give a bit of an overview, who are K-drama fans right here? Raise your hand, type 1, heart emoji. Oh, yes. So if you've seen the K-drama called Startup, they actually have an episode that talks about the hackathon. So you've seen in that one episode, they try to develop a solution that tries to address a key problem in Korea. As how they presented it right there. Next slide. So a hackathon is basically a competition where technology-based solutions are developed in a short period of time. Typically, it's just 2 full days. That's why some people would call it a startup weekend. And the aim is to solve a relevant problem in the quickest time possible. So what we want to do for the hackathon is really try to get as much of the most interesting ideas from young people as possible. Try to disrupt, create something new, because as what was mentioned earlier when we talk about skills in our clean energy future, energy transition is not a linear profession. Maybe you'll become a clean energy entrepreneur, clean energy disruptor, and this is your opportunity to share that idea, especially that earlier we've been talking about different challenges, different issues with regards to our energy industry. So ideas are really relevant. And the bigger question there is, hey, I'm just a young person. How can I develop my idea and present it to leaders, decision makers? Next slide. So yeah, so this is why we, Y4EC and SAYEF, are bringing IRENA New Gen Hackathon here at the Southeast Asia region. So IRENA, or the International Renewable Energy Agency, has their youth arm, which is IRENA Youth, and they have this New Gen Hackathon running all over the world across different regions. As you can see in the photo, that's the IRENA New Gen Hackathon happening in the Americas. That happened a few months ago in Brazil. So we are lucky enough that we are bringing the IRENA New Gen Hackathon here in Southeast Asia through SAYEF. So we have two challenge areas that we want to look into. First would be energy accessibility. So the problem statement here is how may we address energy poverty, causing a widening development gap among remote communities? And the second would be energy security. How may we address vulnerabilities in our current energy systems? Now, with regards to the solution that you might think of, or the idea that you might think of, it could be anything subject to your interpretation of accessibility and security, as long as it contributes to the clean energy future that we as young people aspire. So earlier, we have our speakers talk about floating PV. When you have solar panels floating across the seas or oceans, then it might corrode, it might degrade. Can we develop new technologies that would make it more resilient? Or with regards to energy financing, do you have any interesting ideas that you want to share in order to address these problems? Or even just simple contributions such as youth skills. Do you have ideas on creating new training platforms to upskill young people to make them ready for a greener energy future? So anything and everything across the sun, we're very welcome and we're very open. We just need an idea. You don't have to prove it yet, because that is what the hackathon will do. Next slide, please. So during the hackathon, once you submit your idea to us, your probable solution, what energy challenge is it trying to address, what we want to do is we'll try to undergo 3 online sessions. So you will undergo ideation. How can we maybe pivot, maybe improve your idea, try to help you develop a prototype, try to test it in market, and let you build a pitch presentation after the 3rd online session. So we're making it online so that we can reach as many teams as possible, many amazing ideas as possible. So apart from what Tata mentioned earlier about mentoring, there would also be a dedicated mentor for you. Those who have experience working with startups, how to develop their ideas and transform it into disruptive solutions. And what we wanted the teams to do is submit a pre-recorded pitch presentation at the end of our online session. So next slide, please. So again, another glossary term, what's a pitch? So it's a presentation of your solution to an audience of experts. This culminates our innovation sprints that we're doing online, so that from your idea, we are now able to have a viable solution with a clear presentation, something that we can present to policymakers, decision makers, government, industries, and anyone who might be interested to provide you with the necessary support and resources. Now, next slide, please. So once we get your video pitches, we will be selecting the top 3 teams. and you will be advancing to the finals. What will you get if you're chosen as a top 2 teams? So the team representatives will be given the chance to present their idea to a live audience as a fully funded delegate of SAYEF 2026 in Manila, Philippines. So you get a pass, a fully funded pass. So flights, accommodations, meals for SAYEF 2026, we will be the ones who would cover. And you get the chance to present your idea in person to an esteemed panel of judges. So we will be selecting the champion on that face-to-face pitching competition. And that champion will represent the ASEAN region at the 2027 IRENA Youth Forum in the United Arab Emirates. So apart from that, we will also have special mentorship sessions during SAYEF in person. So we will have other opportunities for you to further improve your solution, especially if you've brought a prototype, how can we further develop it? We have access to local incubators in Manila as well that can give advice, and as well as some local industries that can also give feedback to your solution. Our purpose here in SAYEF, in IRENA New Gen Hackathon, and as well as Y4E, is really mentor you so that your ideas would come to life, especially those ideas that can address the pressing energy challenges in the region. Next slide, please. So what we are asking for you in registration is just an innovative idea, a problem, a solution, and the relevance. So don't worry if your problem, solution, and relevance isn't the perfect state right now. What we'll do is we'll undergo these online sessions for you to improve that. So idea stage submissions are recommended. We'll help you test out that idea. So 3 to 5 members, 18 to 35 from the ASEAN region. So you could be from any background, student, out of school youth, young professional, an engineer, a scientist, a business graduate, or any field possible. Energy challenges, again, are a universal problem, and we give extra points for diversity. So submission deadline, again, is July 27, 11:59 GMT +7. Next slide. So this is the snapshot of IRENA Youth Forum. So imagine this could be you in 2027 at the United Arab Emirates, sharing your amazing idea to the whole world. Thank you, and we're looking forward to your applications. Back to you, Lynn. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jason. All right, so that's about IRENA. And another exciting opportunity available to SAYEF is the Helix Energy Council. This is a regional initiative that brings together young leaders to collaborate with World Challenge. And to introduce this initiative, I'd like now to invite Henry.
Okay. Am I loudly clear?
Yes, we can hear you, Henry.
Okay. Oh. Okay. Now is Helix Energy Forum. This is the second track under SAYEF 2026. Okay, next slide. Okay. I will try to make it more excited as possible. Apart different from hackathon, what Jason has presented, Helix is basically a game where we represent as stakeholders to discuss energy policy in simple terms, like you would show with other young people from across Southeast Asia to discuss ASEAN energy future. And learning from energy policy is one thing, but experiencing it, how those decisions are made is another. Instead of learning through lecture, case study alone, you will step into the roles, work with people, have different priority, and experience it, what it takes to reach a regional agreement. So there will be no winning team or losing team. The goal is to collaborate, building consensus, and learn how complex energy decisions are made. Next slide. Okay, so some of you may already familiar with like model United Nations or MUN. Why Helix is inspired of that simulation, but there are some differences. Like so, in MUN, you represent a country and defend your national interest. Decision usually make through voting. But in Helix, you will represent stakeholder, such as like government, industry, academia, or civil society. So rather than voting, you will be negotiating until the group reach a consensus. So like if more MUN asks what country do you represent, Helix will ask which stakeholder you represent. Next slide. Okay, so how's Helix organized? For this simulation, ASEAN is treated as one integrated energy system rather than like 11 separate countries. Delegate would divide into like 4 major stakeholder groups and a government and policy, industry and market, academia and technical expert, and civil society and community. Within these 4 groups, you will be assigned to one of the 7 stakeholder team where you work with your teammate throughout the simulation. Overall, we are aiming for around 22 delegates. And yep, next slide, please. Okay, so how the channel journal will look like. We are here right now at the application phase. If selected, you will be assigned stakeholder roles and to your team. Before Manila, you will join a online orientation section and prepare your team initial position together. During SAYEF, during the discussion, you will negotiate with all the stakeholder team, work through different energy policy issues, and try to build a consensus. By the end of the simulation, everyone will contribute to a regional policy recommendation developed collectively by the Helix Energy Council. The application will close on the 27th of July, which is the same deadline as hackathon. So don't miss the last deadline if you're interested. Okay, next slide. So what you can expect from Helix? You will represent a stakeholder perspective, one you might not personally agree with. You will negotiate against 6 other teams, each pushing for something different. You will build consensus in a room where nobody get everything they came for, and you will walk away with a drafted, a quantified policy resolution with real number, not a vague statement. So what do you get out of this? It would be energy policy literacy, how these decisions actually get made. This system thinking, how one variable trade off against another. Negotiation skill, the kind you only pick up by finding a yes in a room start with a no. And regional collaboration, work across discipline and border. And finally, leadership, owning a position and defending it with evidence. Next slide. So, who are we looking for? We welcome student, researcher, young profession, entrepreneur, and leadership from all kind of background, engineering, energy, environment, economics, social science, anything. You do not need a prior policy simulation experience. We actually looking for like curiosity, collaboration, and genuine passion for Southeast Asia energy future. Now is a bit of few of practical detail. I think Bea did mention briefly before. Helix is open for application from 18 to 35 who hold Southeast Asian nationality. It's a individual application, not a team application like hackathon. And again, registration will close on the 27th of July. So if you're interested, don't wait. Yeah, that's it. That is Helix Energy Council in a nutshell. So if you have any question, drop in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Henry. So as Henry said, if you have any questions now about today's presentation on SAYEF, the Helix Energy Council or IRENA Hackathon, now is the time for you to drop your questions in the chat box. So we'll give everyone a few moments to think, and please type in your questions in the chat box, and then maybe we'll have time to address some of your questions. I'll give everyone a minute to drop your questions in. So while we are waiting for questions to come, please don't forget to follow Y4EC and also our events on our social media channels. We are very active on both Facebook, Instagram, and also LinkedIn, and you can find all the information you need on our website as well. Now, while waiting for everyone, I'd like to ask Tata a question. Tata, for someone who's interested in SAYEF but is not sure whether they are qualified enough to apply, what advice would you give them?
I think if you're curious and you're interested, you should definitely apply. We, from a point of view of selection, we also value, people who may not have as much experience, and that might be due to financial limitations, might be due to their geographic location. Perhaps they're not in a place where it is accessible to attend types of events, and hence this is online as well. But we really encourage you to, in your application, to kind of show that. So we have quotas, say, for people who may not have the best experience or track record, but have a very high level of interest, and they want to build their career and future in this direction. So my advice would definitely be to apply anyway. Show us what you know and what you hope to accomplish, and let us review it then.
Yes, thank you, Tata. Thank you for your advice. We do have a question regarding the hackathon. So Jason, maybe you'll be able to help us. So there's a question from PY Yang. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. Will the organizers help individual participants form teams, or do they need to form teams in advance?
Yes, you need to form your teams in advance because in the submission form, you need to already name your team members.
Okay, thank you, Jason. I think that's clear. So you do need to have your team members in advance. We have another question from Albert. Can I apply for both program, IRENA and Helix? Bea?
No, you cannot. We would encourage applicants to only just choose the track that best represents their interests and also their experience moving an idea through innovation. We'd encourage you to apply towards the hackathon. While if you're more interested in simulation policy making, we'd encourage you to apply to the Helix Energy Council. So just choose which track that best represents your interest and experience.
Okay, thank you so much, Bea. And we have a question from Rennie about Helix. Henry, can you please take over the question? So he would like to, or he or she, sorry. I'd like to ask about the Helix Energy Council program. What concrete outputs are expected from the delegates during the simulation? And will the policy recommendations produced be submitted to the ASEAN Ministers on Energy?
I think I can take the first part of this question. So basically, we will treat that as a educational, with the educational purpose. Like, so you understand how policy are made, how the discussion is implemented, and yeah, you learn from different perspectives from all the Southeast Asian region. For the second part, I think I need to pass this to maybe Adi or someone from the team.
I could jump in. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, Amira, maybe closer mic to your.
Oh, right. Sorry. So for the second part, basically, we are still working on our passage or pathways to engage with the minister part, but we are actually on communication with the Department of Energy in Philippines, which they are actually the chair of that meetings as well. So basically, regardless that we are going to present it directly or we are going to have a meeting as from the outputs of the policy outputs from the Helix is something that we are working on. In addition to that, we are going to share it as well on our website. So this is something that we kind of like, share as a transparency measures from our side. I hope that would be much clearer. Thank you for Rennie for the question.
Thank you, Amira. And now we have two other questions pretty similar regarding Helix. So Fernanda and Pet both ask how many quota for Helix. I would direct this question to Henry as well. And Bea, do successful candidates get the free pass for Manila event? So first, Henry, on the quota.
Okay, absolutely. So we actually do consider about like diversity. So yes, one of the reason is based on the country representative, but again, we are targeting that number only because it all depends on the quality of the applicant. So we will consider more or less of that number.
Okay, thank you, Henry. I hope that answer is clear. And Bea, do successful candidates get the free pass from Manila event?
Yes, so if you have been selected to participate in either the Helix or the hackathon, and you are considered to be a finalist for the hackathon, you would get an invitation to come to Manila for the SAYEF 2026 event, including its side events, which is the site visit and the panel discussions. Hope that answers the question.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Bea. And one more question regarding Helix. Henry Gali would like to ask about the Energy Council program, considering that all applicants from all academic backgrounds are welcome and no prior experience is required. How robust is the online orientation phase in bridging the gap for non-technical participants? Are there a list of some sort? Are there a list or some sorts of some required knowledge that we can prepare before the activities?
No, not at all. Like, because at the online orientation phase, we will walk you through detail of how the event will run. So, and absolutely, you will be just fine without the technical knowledge. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Henry. Any other question? Or are we all good?
Probably just wanted to add to Bea's answer before regarding the delegates. I mean, I know that there are so many applicants, interests as well. Don't be sad. Also, like later on, if you think like, oh, what if I don't get accepted or something, because later, closer to the date, we are actually going to open a day pass registers. Basically, it's a free attendance, but we are not going to cover travel arrangements. So if you feel like you can self-fund yourself to come to Manila, or if you are also kind of like, have a trip as well as conference, feel free to come as well. Because last year we do have a couple of people that do that, and it's amazing to see as well, part of a networking and so forth. So I think it's also worth mentioning that this delegates track basically is not the only way for you to access or attend or engage with SAYEF or even Y4EC. Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, let me just add on to that a little bit. I think if some of you may have already tried to apply on our link, and you'll see that we differentiate between fully funded, partially funded, and self-funded. Now, this is important to note that for people who are self-funded, it means that from Y4E perspective, we are not paying for your flights and accommodation. But if you're a student, if you are an employee or like a civil servant, sometimes like your company, organization, or university, they will have specific funds if you get accepted to certain conferences or events, which Y4E, which SAYEF is one of them. It's quite often that if you go and talk to your lecturer or your program director, like they will be able to tell you that if they have funds or not. If you're a student, you're listening to this, you have another 9 days to review. My suggestion would be you go to your lecturer, your professor, or your advisor, let them know there's this opportunity, ask them if there's a budget. What we found last year is a lot of people did find budgets from their university that supports them. So it means that if you select self-fund when you apply to Y4E, to SAYEF, there's a higher chance that you will get to become a delegate. What that means is that if you apply for full funding, we have a limited amount of funding, and obviously everybody would like, in an ideal case, we'd able to sponsor everybody to attend. But because that funding is limited, we have to assess based on needs, based on diversity as well. So if you select partial funding, which means you pay for your own flights, but we provide accommodation and food, it's less competitive. And then self-funded is the most the least competitive in terms of how we select. So I want you to keep that in mind when you're applying, both for Helix and for Hackathon. If you select self-fund and you think that's possible, if by your own means or your company, sometimes the company will sponsor because it is an educational program. They have quotas for that. I do suggest you talk to or email your organization or company and to check if that's possible. That would be very helpful. And then I think maybe by end of the week, if they don't reply to you or you find out that it's not possible, then you can apply. Then you should wait and apply for the full funding or the partial funding is my suggestion.
Yes, that is a very, very great tip. Thank you, Tata, for pointing that out. The resources are out there, and sometimes we just have to dig a bit on Google or have the courage to ask your supervisors if there's fund available. So I don't see any other question in the chat. So if there are no further questions, we'll begin wrapping up today's session, unless anyone has any burning question left. Of course, if anything comes to mind afterwards, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email, and we'd be more than happy to continue the conversation. And as we come to the end of today's webinars, I'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks to all of our speakers for generously sharing their knowledge and experiences with us. We'd also like to thank each of you for spending your Saturday morning with us. Your curiosity, enthusiasm, and participation are what make events like this so meaningful. And we hope that today's conversations have given you a deeper understanding of Southeast Asia's energy transition and perhaps inspired you to take the next step in your own journey. Applicants for SAYEF are now open, and we'd be delighted to welcome many of you to Manila, Philippines, where we'll continue these conversations in person with young changemakers from across the region. Until then, thank you very much once again for joining us. We wish you a wonderful day, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye and take care, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
See you.
Thanks, everyone. See you in Manila.
Manila.